Hello and welcome to another edition of Mailbag. What is Mailbag? Well, Mailbag is a feature of the channel where you guys leave lots of comments on the channel and I attempt to answer those comments, or if I can't answer those comments, I throw it out to you guys who have more knowledge on some of this stuff than I do. So let's get into the first mailbag of this session. Remember, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Go over to Instagram and follow me there. Go over to Facebook, follow me there. That's where the normal notices are. And consider becoming a Patreon. Okay, next one comes from Ira Mark Artez. And this is in response to rebuilding the Roland R5 drum machine, a video I did in October 2020. And Mark writes, what a great and well explained video. It's interesting how people have such different... I got somebody turned around to me and said that video was a load of rubbish, and yet I have another YouTuber who says what a great and well explained video. Hey ho, let's move on. I brought an R5 in 1989 and used it for a few years and then just stored it. Just tonight I pulled it out, plugged it in, and it works. I'm not sure if all the buttons indeed work until I fool around with it a bit more, but it's not as grimy as the one you've got. My question is that what did you use to clean the grime away? I hesitate to use water, perhaps isopropyl alcohol, which you mentioned at one point. Did you use contact cleaner anywhere? My volume slider does crackle a bit when I move it, so I'm thinking about shooting some contact cleaner in there, but seeking advice because it's not bad enough to remove everything, since access appears to be from the bottom up. Sorry for the long narrative. Actually, Mark, that wasn't as long as some of the comments and questions I get. But, as I said, thank you for the feedback on the video. All feedback is well received, positive and negative. I always say that. And I do publish negative feedback. So, you know, for some people who think that I hold it all back, I do publish negative comments on my channel. As long as they're well reasoned and well argued, I accept the criticism. Now, there is a generally unwritten rule to cleaning synthesizers or any other equipment like this, which is sort of kind of has delicate printing on the surface of it. And the rule pretty much is you use the least abrasive cleaning substance first. So what do I mean by that? So, you know, so basically water and a sort of fairly soft cloth is probably the least abrasive, and then you start working your way upwards. Now I always start with a bowl full of fairy liquid, which is a branded washing up liquid here in the UK, and I always do use fairy liquid. Now people say there's no difference between the various different washing up liquids. There is. So I always use fairy liquid, just me, but that's me. And I say that's a brand in the UK, possibly in Europe. I'm not sure where else that brand is used. In warm, and it's a bowl of warm water that I use that with. So when I say warm, it's probably more hot than warm. And I use an old toothbrush, a fairly soft toothbrush, for getting into sort of areas around switches and knobs and that sort of stuff. Because obviously it's quite often hard to get a cloth in there. I mean, the secret is to effectively use a cloth with like a screwdriver, which I'm just reaching for, like that. So effectively use the end of a flat-bladed screwdriver to run along, but this toothbrush gets nicely into those areas, and it's not very abrasive. So you tend to use a toothbrush. The next solution up from that is a good quality window cleaner. Now, window cleaning solutions are a slightly different makeup to washing up liquid. Yes, they both can do the same thing, but the window cleaner tends to lift the dirt a bit better if it's sort of kind of more ground in, without affecting the screen printing on the particular unit So that would be my next one up, is to try and use a window cleaner. And then it's only then do I start to get to the more abrasive or more industrialized chemicals like isopropyl alcohol. I would never use isopropyl alcohol on an area where you've got screen printing or anything that harsh. And the reason for that is if you were to rub isopropyl alcohol over the screen print will start to lift, okay? And you know, you kind of have to work out, do you want the thing to be completely grime free, or are you prepared to live with the grime you can't get off to retain the decals and screen printing? I kind of adopt the latter, that even if once I've cleaned it, once I've gone over it with, you know, window solution or whatever else it happens to be, then I'm kind of satisfied that it's going to be clean. Yes, it might not be the bright colour, but it's clean, it's been cleaned, it's not as grimy, it's not covered in God knows whatever gunk that it was covered in, if you get my drift. It's less sanitized, or less desanitized. Actually, that's probably the better way to put it. And you've got most of the grit and grime off it that was on it. And as I say, you know, getting round switches and faders and that sort of stuff is really difficult. And the other thing I use is I've got my little Hoover here, and this is really quite good for lifting surface stuff off. But if you want something a bit more industrial, then if you've got a Dyson or a Shark or something like that, something with a fair old bit of suction, you can get small attachments for them. And that's what I tend to use, is the smaller attachments, so you get a lot of suction going through this end piece with a little brush on the end of it. And you can buy them, buy attachments for Hoovers that do this sort of stuff. So you've got the hose that comes off the Hoover, and then you can buy an attachment, and I've got the attachments in the house with the Hoover that actually really narrows it down. The only problem with that is that you tend to, after a very short amount of running with the Hoover in that thing, when you're going over the whatever it happens to be, you tend to flip the cutout, the suction cutout, and you end up having to switch the Hoover off and on. It can get a bit tedious, and that's because the Hoover is expecting a certain amount of suction, and where it can't, where the suction is restricted, which it would be by one of these attachments on the end of the Hoover, it sees that there's an obstruction, and rather than trying to burn the motor out, it flips a cutout that actually bypasses the suction, so you don't burn your motor out. That's what that's to do with. Anyway, I digress. So basically, warm soapy water will normally get rid of most of the grime, I have to be honest. It's definitely a good place to start. It's a good, if you're going to go over something, first of all, go over it with the warm soapy water. That will get most of the horrible grimy gunkiness off, and then the window cleaning stuff and whatever else then is sort of the next level of deep clean. And on my R5, it got rid of most of the debris. I mean, my R5 was truly horrible, and unfortunately most of the decals are already gone, so I didn't have the dilemma about whether I would use something a bit more abrasive, because the damage was already done. So that's the thing. The other thing is, when you're running higher strength clean solutions, dilute them down when you start. So don't run isopropyl alcohol. If you're going to run isopropyl alcohol in an area you're not sure about, dilute it down, because you know, coming out of the bottle here, it's 90 odd % proof, and that's quite strong. So what you do is you put, you know, 10 millilitres of isopropyl alcohol to 90 millilitres of water, and therefore you're diluting it down. Now, I'm not saying dilute it down that much, but you know, you get the drift. Now, the other thing is, when you actually get into sorting out circuit boards, now people scream at me about this, but I still stand by what I say, that, you know, a scrubbing brush and warm soapy water actually will clean a circuit board up quite spectacularly. But remember to leave them to dry. So if you put a lot of water on a circuit board, you know, my personal thing about this is, I would not touch that circuit board for about 5 days. I would put it in a warm area. I used to put it in an airing cupboard when I lived with my ex and when I lived on my own. And here I've got a radiator that actually I've got a little shelf that goes on top of the radiator, and I put things on top of there and leave them for a few days. The shelf that I put on top of the radiator is one of these sort of wire mesh type shelves, and it allows the heat from the radiator to get through and circulate around the room. It doesn't block the heat, but it dries out a circuit board quite nicely. But as I say, I wouldn't touch them or put any power on them for at least 5 days. And before I do, I tend to go and have a good old look at the circuit, look at underneath the like resistors and components that are slightly raised, just to make sure there's no dampness or residue there, because that will create a short. And I've said this before, and people have sort of looked at me horrified, and I've had comments come seriously. But when I used to repair disco lights years ago, and most times what's wrong with disco lights is the fact that they've been up in a ceiling back then in a nightclub ceiling where you've got smoke and you've got nicotine and you've got tar and all kinds of other nasties, and they get into the atmosphere in a nightclub, and of course where are all the fans? Above the lights, so all the horribleness gets sucked up through the lighting system. And half the time that these things didn't work was because their tracks became gummed up with all the residue particles from whatever's in the air in the nightclub. You know, I'm surprised more people haven't died from going to nightclubs in the 70s and 80s, given what was in the air. But you know what I've done in the past with those, and the people sort of, as I say, do look at me rather horrified, is I've put them in the dishwasher. And putting the circuit board in the dishwasher, you know, just in the downstairs of the tray, and then run in the dishwasher, but don't run it on the take the things out before the drying cycle. So you kind of need to understand, you know, most modern dishwashers tell you how long each cycle is. So you've got kind of the pre-wash and the wash cycle, and that will be, say, I don't know, 15 minutes or something like that. So you set a timer and you take them out at 45 minutes, and then just let them drip dry somewhere else. So don't let them go through the drying cycle. But yeah, do that, and I tell you what, a dishwasher tablet in a dishwasher will, believe you me, clean a circuit board up beautifully. It's much the same as putting a circuit board into an ultrasonic tank, which people wouldn't think of, would not think about, putting something in an ultrasonic tank filled with water, but they wouldn't think about putting it in a dishwasher. And let's face it, most of us have got dishwashers, not many of us have got ultrasonic tanks. The other thing about contact cleaner is that a good contact cleaner is worth its weight in gold. And in the UK, we used to have a company called Maplin. I think I've still got a tube of contact cleaner. There you go. There's a tube of Maplin contact cleaner. It's my last tube of Maplin contact cleaner. But their contact cleaner was actually very good. Used it all the time. And as I say, I used to buy it in sort of cases of 6, and that's my last one. Maplin went bust about 3 years ago, so I'm never going to get another set of that. But contact cleaner is great. The problem with contact cleaners is if you use it too much. In a slider, sliders have a lubricant in them. Right? It's not a lot of lubricant, but they have a lubricant in them that allows them to slide up and down quite freely. And what contact cleaner does, as well as taking away any rubbish and grime that's on the contact, it also takes away the lubricant. So if you use contact cleaner too many times, what you'll end up with is you'll end up actually taking the lubricant out, because it dissolves the lubricant at the same time, and then you might end up having to replace the fader, because you then start to damage the actual fader mechanism. Anyway, I hope that points you in the right direction for how would you start to clean a synthesizer or other electronics piece of equipment.